The night before the surgery, the air was thick with an unspoken dread. The hospital, with its long, echoing corridors and the sterile scent that permeated every corner, felt more like a mausoleum than a place of healing. I was scheduled for a routine procedure, something the doctors assured me was straightforward. Yet as I lay in the dimly lit room, shadows dancing across the walls from the faint glow of the hallway lights, an inexplicable fear took hold. It whispered of things unseen, of the darkness that lurked beneath the veneer of medical precision. I awoke not to the gentle lifting of anesthesia's veil, but to a half-conscious nightmare. The operating room was shrouded in darkness, save for a single, flickering light above me that cast grotesque shadows across the faces of the surgical team. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and their movements were jerky, as if controlled by unseen strings. I tried to scream, to move, but my body was a traitor, paralyzed and mute. The sound of their voices was a cacophony of whispers, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, yet it filled me with an unspeakable terror. The air was charged with a malevolent energy, and as they leaned over me, instruments gleaming in the erratic light, I realized this was no routine surgery. They were searching for something inside me, something ancient and forgotten. Suddenly the room shook, a violent tremor that sent instruments clattering to the floor. The light flickered wildly, casting the room into a strobe-lit nightmare. From the shadows, shapes began to emerge, formless entities that whispered of old, unfulfilled pacts and debts to be collected. The surgeons paid them no heed, focused entirely on their macabre task. But the entities circled closer, their whispers growing louder, a maddening chorus that promised a fate worse than death. In a moment of sheer terror, one of the entities lunged at me, its face a shifting mass of shadows, and I felt a cold touch against my chest. The heart monitor screamed, a piercing wail that matched my own silent screams. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The lights stabilized, the shadows receded, and the surgical team continued their work as if nothing had happened. But the air remained heavy with the echo of those whispered promises, and the cold touch on my chest burned like a brand. When the surgery was over and I was wheeled back to my room, the world seemed a different place. The hospital's sterile corridors now whispered of hidden depths, of secrets buried beneath layers of reality. I was left with a deep, unshakable certainty that something had been awakened during that surgery, something that had lain dormant within me, biding its time. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of shadows that moved just beyond the corner of my vision. Nightmares plagued my sleep, vivid and terrifying, filled with whispers and the sensation of unseen presences lurking in the darkness. The experience had opened a door that I couldn't close, a portal to a realm of ancient fears and unseen watchers. The surgery, meant to heal, had instead left me marked, a part of a mystery far older and darker than I could have imagined. And as I searched for answers, for some way to understand what had happened to me, I realized that some doors once opened can never be closed. The shadows that now walked with me were a constant reminder of that terrifying night, of the moment when the boundary between worlds had thinned, and I had glimpsed the unimaginable horrors that lay just beyond, waiting for their chance to cross over. The sensation of waking up to darkness, complete and oppressive, is something I never thought I'd experience outside of a nightmare. Yet here I was, my consciousness slowly surfacing from the depths of unconsciousness, only to find myself confined in a space so tight, so suffocating, that panic instantly clawed at my throat. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of earth and decay, and as I tried to move, I realized with a heart-stopping dread that I was trapped, buried alive. At first, I refused to believe it, thinking it had to be a mistake, a horrible dream I could wake up from. But the hard, unyielding surfaces around me told a different story. My hands, when I tried to stretch them out, met with the cold, compact resistance of a wooden lid inches from my face. My breaths became rapid, shallow, each one a gasp as the terror took hold. I shouted for help, my voice breaking in the claustrophobic chamber, but my pleas were absorbed by the thick layers of earth above me. I had read about the primal fear of being buried alive, a fear that had haunted humanity since ancient times. Now, ensnared in its terrifying grip, I understood its true depth. The darkness wasn't just around me. It felt like it was seeping into me, filling every pore, every cell of my body with despair. My mind raced, trying to piece together how I ended up in this horror. Fragments of memory flashed through my mind. Walking home, a sudden sharp pain at the back of my head, and then nothing until this awakening into a nightmare. Had I been kidnapped? Buried in a makeshift grave as some twisted act of vengeance or sadism? The thought that someone could do this to another human being, leaving them to a fate worse than death, was as horrifying as my predicament. In a desperate bid for survival, I started to fight against my wooden prison. I scratched, pounded, and pushed against the lid with all the strength I could muster. But the effort only exhausted me, making my breathing more labored, the air thinner. Time lost all meaning in the pitch black, every passing second a battle against the rising tide of panic and the inexorable approach of suffocation. Just as I was about to succumb to despair, a faint sound reached my ears. At first I thought it was the product of my frantic mind, but then it grew clearer. A distant, muffled sound of voices and the unmistakable scrape of shovels against earth. Hope surged through me with the force of a tidal wave. I screamed again, pounding with renewed vigor, praying that the rescuers would hear me, find me before it was too late. The digging sounds grew louder, more frantic, and then in a moment that felt as miraculous as the birth of the universe, light broke through a small corner of my wooden tomb. Fresh, cool air rushed in, and hands, real human hands, reached in to pull me out into the world of the living. I emerged from the grave gasping, crying, and trembling, but alive. The relief of rescue, of survival, was overwhelming. Yet even as I was enveloped in the arms of my saviors, the shadows of the experience clung to me, a dark shroud that might never fully lift. The police investigation that followed revealed a deranged individual behind my abduction. Someone who had been stalking me without my knowledge, their obsession culminating in a twisted fantasy of possessing me forever, in death if not in life. The realization that I had come so close to being lost, forgotten beneath the earth, haunted me long after my physical wounds had healed. The experience of being buried alive left me with scars that are invisible but indelibly etched into my psyche. Every patch of earth, every closed space, carries a whisper of that terror. Yet it also instilled in me a profound appreciation for life, for the breath in my lungs, and for the light of day. The world, with all its dangers, is also a place of incredible beauty and resilience, a place where hope can pierce through the deepest darkness. And in that realization, there is a kind of triumph, a defiance against the darkness that sought to claim me. I'll never forget the day I fell through the ice on a frozen lake. The morning had dawned cold and clear, with a brittle silence that seemed to amplify every sound. My breath hung in the air like mist as I ventured onto the ice, confident in the thickness I had measured just days before. The sun, a pale disk in the sky, offered little warmth, its light reflecting off the snow-covered surface, creating a blinding expanse. As I walked, the reassuring crunch of snow beneath my feet was suddenly replaced by a sharp, echoing crack. Time seemed to slow as I realized what was happening. The ice beneath me groaned, a deep, ominous sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the lake. Panic surged through me, a primal fear taking hold as I felt the ice give way. The shock of the icy water was immediate and all-consuming. It felt as though 1,000 needles were piercing my skin, my breath stolen by the frigid embrace of the lake. The cold clawed at my limbs, sapping my strength as I struggled to find the hole through which I had fallen. Above me, the surface of the water became a ceiling of shifting, shimmering light, just out of reach. Desperation fueled my movements as I fought against the weight of my sodden clothes, my arms flailing in the murky depths. The cold was a living thing, wrapping itself around me, drawing me deeper. My lungs screamed for air, every instinct crying out for survival. I thought of my family, of the unspoken goodbyes, and the world I might never see again. Then in a burst of clarity amidst the chaos, I remembered what I had learned about ice rescues. I stopped my panicked movements, trying to conserve my dwindling energy. With trembling hands, I managed to turn myself towards the direction I believed the hole to be. Kicking with all the strength I could muster, I propelled myself upward, my hands breaking the surface and finding the jagged edge of the ice. Pulling myself out was a battle against the lake's icy grip. Every movement was labored, the cold a vice around my chest, but slowly, agonizingly, I dragged myself back onto the solid ice, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. Lying there, I looked up at the sky, the sun still indifferent in its lofty perch. The walk back to safety was a blur, each step driven by an adrenaline-fueled determination not to succumb to the cold. Once safe, the reality of what had happened hit me. I had survived, but the memory of that fall, the fear, and the cold would stay with me forever. It was a stark reminder of nature's power and indifference, a lesson in respect and humility that I would never forget.